our agenda. I believe we're on item 26. I'll turn over to our County Administrative Officer, Ray Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this item is similar to item number 25 on our agenda. Your board did request updates with regards to the CBOs and their performance of the year for the funds that were allocated to them for fiscal year 15-16. We have Melinda here to introduce the item. Melinda?
Good afternoon. As part of your policies every year, the board allocates 6% of their sales tax receipts of the previous year, and they allocate that money to various community-based organizations. Those community-based organizations do an application for funding requests. And so this year, your board allocated to 6 different community-based organizations. I've asked them to come and make a presentation, which is part of the criteria under that contract. I asked 3 to come today and 3 to come on the 24th. However, one of them, of the 3 that was coming today, was not able to make it at 1:30. Was here earlier today, but was not able to wait until the 1:30 meeting. So he's going to actually also come on the 24th. And so today I have Paulina Valdivia from Jóvenes de Antonio is going to give a report, and so is Clay Kemp from the Senior Council also. Paulina?
Good afternoon, not good morning, right? Hopefully everybody enjoyed their lunch. So I have my report will be briefed. Pauline Valdivia, and I'm the Executive Director of Jóvenes de Antonio Senior Services in San Benito County. We have been providing services for the elderly for over 40 years. Will be 40 years. Will be 41 years pretty soon. So anyway, included in our projected amount of meals served for the fiscal year 2015-16. This is the information I have. Oops. Okay.
Sorry.
Am I touching something?
Yeah, but it's okay. You leaned on it.
Okay.
Apologies.
That's okay.
Yep. No, I'm trying to clear this.
Okay, here we go. Computers don't like me anyway. At the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2016, the amount of meals projected to be served will be 34,728 for both the congregate and meal programs, Meals on Wheels program. This reflects a 5% reduction in meals served over the last fiscal year. JDA continues to receive the same amount of funding to operate the programs. This means a reduction in services because it doesn't keep up with inflation. As you all know, everything just keeps increasing and increasing. The food and consumable costs, for example, continue to increase as other fixed costs in the agency that we need to operate. Our other services were provided to over 2,600 seniors in San Benito County, and the folks that receive the congregate meals and home delivery meal are part of that figure. I want to thank you for your continued support, which allows us to serve the meals and other essential services to seniors in San Benito County. It also allows the seniors to live longer and with all the supportive services they receive from the agency. I don't know if you have any questions at this time, but that's my brief report, and I do want to thank you again for your commitment. I mean, we could not do it without your help. I want to stress that as highly as I can, and we appreciate anything and everything that you do provide for the agency so we can continue the services. Being a nonprofit, it's real difficult to continue the same level of services when the resources are there, and I have to do a lot of not fundraising, but apply for different funds so we can supplement some of the services, the services that we provide. I don't know if you have any questions. If
Are
not,
there any questions at this time? from
I have
members
a
of the board?
question, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios.
Pauline, there's a reduction in the amount of meals that are served by 5.5%.
Yes.
But we're supposed to be increasing our senior population. What do you attribute that reduction to?
okay, that would be, let me see, I have my little paper here. I knew you were going to ask that question. That would reflect about, 200 to 210 meals for the year, less that we would be providing. If it continues in the same trend, like I said, I had to use like 9 months projection figures to come out with an annual figure, average annual, because we're not over with the fiscal year. It'll end next month, which is just around the corner. But that's what I would be looking at that amount of meals for the year.
But why do you think the meals that you're serving are less than prior years if our population of seniors is growing?
Yeah, well, I have to keep, for example, for the Meals on Wheels program, I have a cap. We don't go over a certain amount. We do 80 meals a day. I can't. If I had the resources, I would increase it to 90. The congregate also, I have a cap of 70 per day. And we can't go over that, so I haven't had to do like a reservation list yet, but that one is also a little bit low because of that. So I have to, that's how I deal with the deficit, is I decrease the services. Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't like to do that because then I end up losing funds from the contributions that the seniors make, et cetera. So it's like a trickle effect. And it's just that, we just can't, there's not much more to do with the same amount of money we've been getting for several years.
Okay, so you need to reduce the meals served because
Yeah,
of the money that you have. Okay, thank
That's
you.
what I do. And unfortunately, that's what happens is you reduce services,
Okay,
not only in this area, but in other areas of the agency.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay?
Other questions?
Yeah.
President Patel.
Thank you. Pauline, how's the program in San Juan? Is that growing or is that?
Right now, we're averaging about 15 to 20. I have 20 meals budgeted in San Juan Bautista, and they're averaging about 50 meals a day, a little bit, almost 18. But we keep that because we only serve 1 day a week, and the seniors really enjoy that day. They have their lunch and they have their activities. We provide like nutrition education over there, anything else that's beneficial to the seniors over there. And then sometimes when we have functions in Hollister, they'll come over. Not all of them, but some of them do, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're continuing that site the same way it is.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? And thank you, Pauline.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for your support. The seniors really appreciate it. We
No,
appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I don't know, public comment, possibly? I don't know if you...
Do we want to allow all the speakers to go first and then allow the comments at the end, or?
Yeah.
Right, because we have some additional speakers.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And then Mr. Kemp is here also. Or, I'm sorry, did you want to do comments first?
Oh, no, I
They're
think
not
if we
good.
can
Okay.
keep going, yeah.
Good afternoon. Clay Kemp, Executive Director of the Seniors Council. Here is the Area Agency on Aging of San Benito and Santa Cruz counties. And if I can just bore you, I mean, most of you have heard this and probably could recite this as well as I can, but for the audience members, I think it's worth repeating. It's only once or twice a year we do this. But we perform a quasi-government role by being the Area Agency on Aging. In most parts of California, a county actually performs the role that we perform. In your wisdom and in your predecessor's wisdom, it's been determined that a community-based nonprofit can perform those duties for less of a cost and in some ways more efficiently than government can. So we have this partnership arrangement with both counties where we serve as the AAA for this community. Every place in the U.S. has a designated Area Agency on Aging, and that's part of the federal Older Americans Act. And the beauty of that act is it provides federal funding with some broad guidelines for how those funds can be used to serve seniors, and then requires local control for the decision-making about how those services are provided. And that's a great thing because we all know serving seniors in Hollister or in Piscines is really different than serving seniors in downtown New York City or downtown LA, for example. So it allows a local entity to become the expert in its community and work with partner agencies such as Jóvenes de Antaño to provide funding to deliver services. I purposely didn't bring statistics about the numbers of seniors that we serve because it's really the other agencies here that are providing the direct service. We're an oversight agency. We're the conduit for the funding they receive. We're also the organization that monitors their performance. So Jóvenes is one of the agencies we contract with. HICAP is another one. HICAP does not receive local funding, so you won't hear from them. HICAP stands for Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program, and that really helps seniors navigate the Medicare system once they become old enough to qualify for that. It's very complicated, and we provide help with that. Creighton Mendeville, who had to leave, is another provider of services through Senior Citizens Legal Services. And unfortunately, the reason Creighton took off was he had a court case at 1:30. So as much as he didn't want to stand all of you up, he figured probably less of a problem than standing up a judge and a client in court. So he did send his apologies and asked that I speak to those, but he'll come back at a future date. Lastly, we fund the Ombudsman Program, Advocacy, Inc. They will be here at the next meeting to talk about what they do. They basically provide protection for seniors living in nursing homes. The federal funds come with the requirement for both a small amount of state match and also some local match. So your contributions both to our organization and to the other provider entities allow us to pull down those federal dollars. And it's really, I think, a great example of a public-private partnership where this county allows us as a nonprofit to save the county money by doing the services ourselves, but also pull in these federal and state dollars. And one of the things you did recently was you endorsed an effort that we're providing the leadership on, which is to augment state funding to meal programs. So I think John Balutz from Long-Term Care Commission came here and presented that. But that's really an effort and an example of the type of work that we do as advocates on the state level. One point about that, and Pauline didn't give herself enough credit in terms of why the number of meals being delivered is staying stagnant or decreasing while the population is going up. And it's really that lack of additional federal dollars. We're stuck at our 84, 85 level of funding. And, think about that, 32 years of just inflation plus the challenge of serving more seniors is really crippling our programs in their ability to deliver services. So it's one of the reasons why we feel it's important as a AAA for us to provide leadership in trying to get augmented state funding, because otherwise, the numbers served and the waiting lists are just going to continue to grow. One little tidbit about that, if we look at the Greater Bay Area Consumer Price Index for the past year and apply that 12 months going forward, there would be 500,000, 500,000 fewer meals provided statewide just due to inflation to seniors this coming year. Over 330,000 of those are home-delivered meals, really the meals to the most vulnerable part of our population, and about another 175,000 to our congregate sites. So we're really looking at a crucial situation where we're losing 500,000 meals a year just to inflationary costs, and it's part of why we try to be your advocates in putting forth the challenge for this and really appreciate your partnership in it. There was a couple other things just really quickly. One that I want to share, which is just a fact sheet about San Benito County seniors, how many there are, what the growth rates are, and what some of the challenges they're facing are. But I think more importantly than that, the county did a great thing about 6 months ago. It was really instrumental to providing services here. And in terms of the services, we distribute about $1.7 million in local funding. And 400,000, or roughly a quarter of that, is designated to services in San Benito County. It's about 10 to 15% more than the population breakdown would relate to. That requires this local match. And in the past year, the city of Hollister backed out of providing that local match. And this board, and especially Supervisors Barrios and Botello, were instrumental in addressing that issue. And had that not happened, that $400,000 that we contract with other agencies for would have shrunk by almost $80,000 a year. So by the two of you stepping up and by the board supporting them and recognizing what we do, we were able to keep that funding flowing here. And to me, that's kind of the ultimate example of how a nonprofit and local government can work together to solve a big problem and make sure the federal dollars keep flowing as we would like it to. Unless you have any questions, I would just add one thing, and that's that we've conducted a comprehensive needs assessment for seniors in Santa Cruz and San Benito counties. You've heard about this before. It's ready for release, and we'll be scheduling a time to come here with your permission. We've talked about that previously. I'm kind of seeing it as something we would wait till after the budget cycles due and not try to jam something in on what's already a very loaded agenda for all of you. But that'll be forthcoming, so hopefully we'll be back here and sharing that. So if there's other questions, I'd be happy to field those.
Any questions from members of the board?
No, thank you.
No, just a comment, Mr. Chairman. You do great work, and our county benefits tremendously, and probably a little bit more being in this agency than per capita for our seniors. And I'm really looking forward for that presentation. Probably after, like you said, after the budget. See, I think Supervisor Barrios and I have seen portions of that
We have.
report, and I think the other board members and the public would appreciate seeing those numbers and seeing the need in our own community.
Awesome. Any other comments, questions?
Yep.
Thank you.
And thanks for your support and funding. We couldn't do it without you.
Melinda, do we have any other presenters?
Those are the reports that I have for today.
Okay.
Just to let you know, on May 24th, the Emmaus House, Community Food Bank, Advocacy, and the Senior Legals Council services will be here to make their presentations also.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any questions?
No. At this time, I'll open up to the public for comments. No comment cards? Okay, see none. I don't think that this requires any action from the board, so we will go ahead and move on. Item 27. County Administrative Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this item's coming out of administration as well. This item kind of goes hand in hand with the sales tax initiative. One of the things that the county is looking at and has been looking at for some time is social media and being able to be more vocal to the community of what we're doing and within the county. So with that being said, I've asked Sarah De Leon, to come up and present today to your board. This really going to be a pilot, but she can elaborate a little further. Sorry.
Thank you, Ray. I'm just going to shut this. Do you mind? Okay, Louis? Okay. So yes, I did invite IT. I'm hoping they can make it on over, but they might be wrapped up in some of their work. As our CAO explained, this is a pilot program. You see probably a little over 40 pages of policy and procedures that surround social media. We're hoping to have this start in 3 main areas: elections, the Office of Emergency Services, and administration, as a pilot for administration and IT staff to figure out how much work is involved, what the security structure looks like for IT, how we're maintaining our user accounts, etc. The idea in the policy, and you'll note that the first item here, 2016-05-000, that's more the general policies that includes definitions, and consider it the umbrella of the policies for the remainders in the background. It basically identifies how the structure is set up, that departments coming on board with social media would have to submit a work plan so that both administration, county council, and IT understands the department's purpose in using social media in their area. It designates a social media coordinator for them and requires them to have all their comments approved. It also specifies the networks that will be approved for now by IT, which includes only 3 for the time being: Facebook, Twitter, and we also have YouTube on there. However, I think we're going to focus on the first 2 through this pilot only. It also sets up a comment policy and a disclaimer policy so that the public understands that comments, once posted, it's a moderated discussion forum and not necessarily a public forum. So that provides a little less liability in regards to the county when any kind of comments are discriminatory or otherwise. There's a specific policy in there for that. And it's a lot of reading, but I think it's basically drafted from both the county of Marin and Orange County. It is a little complicated, but at times it has to be. I know you guys can understand we have a business need to do it, but it can also get kind of touchy when you start to remove posts and what is really considered the public's versus, something that we shouldn't be sharing on a public domain. So if there are any questions, Sacramento is here.
Hey, Sarah, I do have one question.
Yes.
Before I ask the other members of the board, but there was some uncertainty. I received a phone call about us using taxpayer money to promote the upcoming sales tax through this policy. This policy specifically is for education purposes, right?
Correct.
Non-campaign related.
Correct.
We're talking about the services that we offer taxpayers through our county.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. So we would not be saying yes or no promoting any sort of tax proposal, more so understanding the programs and services that the county offers. For example, the community choice energy workshop you have coming up would be something administration would post. Parks Commission meeting coming up and the discussions about San Justo, we'd post that. So really events, informative. If Melinda wanted to post about the budget and we noticed that we have $20 million in requests from the department, but she could only recommend $10 million because we don't have that gap, that's informative. We would not be putting on there about sales tax.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from members of the board? Okay, at this time, I'd like to open up to the public. Questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a decision. Anyone?
So moved, Mr. Chair,
Staff recommendation?
per staff recommendation.
I will second that.
Okay, the motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 28 from our county counsel's office.
The abandoned vehicle program, which abates abandoned vehicles in the county, was funded through an abandoned vehicle abatement fee. Since it was first started, there was changes in state law, and it was determined that it was necessary to go out for an election to continue that fee for an additional 10-year period of time. The fee is $1 per registration on most vehicles and a $2 per vehicle registration on certain commercial vehicles. The proposal that was submitted to the voters twice in 2014 was a very simple tax measure. Is basically asking whether or not the county should continue collection of the $1 per vehicle or $2 per commercial vehicle fee for an additional 10-year term under the California Vehicle Code sections 9250.7 and 22710. And unfortunately, that was narrowly defeated in 2014, although I have to note that there wasn't a lot of public education at the time. It received a majority vote. There was actually 66.13 were in favor of it. And there was only 33% that was opposed to the fee. But because it's for a specific purpose, it's considered a special tax. And so it would have required 66% of the voters to approve it. And so it needed approximately 0.5% additional voter approval. Before the fee was seized, it collected approximately $54,000 per year. The cost of going out for another election is approximately $10,000. And the question before the board today is whether the board would like to present that to the voters, again, to see whether or not we can achieve the 66 2/3% approval rating to continue this fee, so we have that program funded in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Any questions from members of the board?
I have a question.
President Mattel?
What have we been doing with the cars since then? Is it they just sit where they've been abandoned, or or a property owner pays for it, or what's happening since the program has ceased?
I could get you that information. I don't know. I know that the program hasn't been funded, and so I think that I'd have to refer to code enforcement for more information about what is happening to the vehicles now. I assume that if it's on the property, like a property owner's, like on private property, maybe the property owner is removing the vehicle at their own expense, but I'd have to get that information for the board.
Yeah, and second thing, it seems like there's a couple of tax measures on the ballot in November anyway, and with the schools are doing some bonds too. I don't know. I'm kind of focused in on our own tax measure, and I don't want to convolute it with another one.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Or doubts?
Barbara, do you have the June's results?
I do. I have both results. The one that in June was a little bit, didn't come quite as close. It was 63.24. I'm looking at unofficial results, but 63.24%. And there was a lot less people voting in that election, approximately 7,000. Let me make sure, about 7,000. And in the final election, there was about 12,000 that voted in the November election. Let's see, 12,992. Okay. So it was 63 the first time, and then it went up to 66.
So the trend is up on this?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Due to the November election, the greater number of voters voting in the election, too.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I know that there wasn't a lot of public outreach during the last election cycle regarding the program and the need for it and how many vehicles that have been abated. I know that they have some good statistics from the time that the program first started. And if the board was inclined, we'd have to bring that back to formal action before the Board of Supervisors with a resolution, and we could present the statistics on it about how many vehicles have been abated over the inception since the program's been commenced.
Okay. Supervisor Barrios, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Barbara, what are we doing different as far as education? I don't see us doing anything more than we've done before. Is there a plan for?
Well, we could develop a plan. I think that some sort of education about the fact that does remove abandoned vehicles, which can be a blight in the community. I think that we should, if we're going to do it again, we should have outreach. If we're not going to have outreach, and some sort of education in a neutral fashion about how many vehicles are abated per year with this, then if we don't have an education plan to go forward, then I don't know that there's a point in doing the tax measure again. So if the board was inclined, then we should bring that back with the resolution to approve the tax measure. We can also bring back an education presentation for the board about how we're going to educate the public about this program and the benefits that it does have.
Yeah, and I think we should also include, I believe in the ballot, we put in a statement with either statistics or information from prior that we should probably be able to show that those abandoned vehicles have remained, how many have remained unattended or they've stayed because we didn't pass this back in 2014. So I think it's important that we educate the public in that respect. I think this is a much needed measure. The only problem is that it will interfere with our 1% that we're trying to put on the ballot in November. What would be the next opportunity?
Well, I think that the November election probably, I don't know whether we'd wait until would we wait until the next general election and rather doing it this, would we wait until 2018 perhaps?
And I don't believe that this applies to vehicles that are in private property. I believe these are abandoned vehicles.
Abandoned, but I think that it can apply if they're parked on somebody's ranch, for example. I think that it can apply if it's not the property owners.
Oh, I see. Then
yeah,
it
because
doesn't belong to the owner, but it's left there by somebody.
It's left by, like,
else.
abandoned out in the
Got it.
country,
Okay.
for example.
All right.
Mr. Chair, one question.
Hold on one second. Supervisor Mother? Oh, go ahead. Dela Cruz.
Barbara, this program is mostly for the unincorporated area?
It's a county-wide program.
So city.
We did
Saffron-
notify the city when it ceased it was countywide.
Okay.
Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm leaning with Supervisor Patello. I'm not quite ready to go back to the voter with this one yet. I just think there's too much else going on, too many other taxes out there, and I'm not getting phone calls about abandoned vehicles. Maybe, I don't know if any of you are.
No.
I haven't heard from staff that it's an issue. I think we just need to probably wait and see if we end up with issues.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I kind of go back on this a little bit. I think towing companies would tow a workable car away, store it for like $50 a day, and then own the car after 30. If we were to do another specialty tax, I'd rather go after the VOT tax and then have a revenue stream that would fund the economic interest people that we heard from earlier this meeting, and that would be the revenue stream to fund, the tourism activities through the VOT, which would generate more money. And we got shot down twice with this already, so that's the way I'm looking at it too.
Mr. Chair, may I make a recommendation? Before we finalize our decision, could we get information from code enforcement and see, I haven't gotten any phone calls, but maybe there is a bigger issue than we are aware of, and see what has happened since that tax was no longer applied for San Benito County. Has it affected us in a very, negative way? Are there more vehicles out there? Because really, if you want to encourage people to come to San Benito County and you have all these abandoned cars, I'll tell you, it's really quite nasty. The blight is not something that people would enjoy. I have, on Santa Ana Road, there is a home there. They just put up a fence to hide their cars in the back. Rather than moving their vehicles, they probably have at least a dozen cars behind a fence now. And that's unhealthy because you've got oil leaks, you've got children that can get trapped in them, they become a real safety issue as well. So I think we really need to get numbers.
Okay, we can do that.
All right. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to open up for public comment.
Marty Richard from Hollister. I would just ask that when they come back with a report, if you would agree to ask the staff. I'm interested in the economics of this. In other words, can't we get a program that pays for itself? I don't know what an abandoned car is worth. I don't know if any tow company wants it. I don't know if any junkyard wants what's left over. Seems to me there's a lot of metal in there, but I have no idea what metal is worth these days. And we ought to look back a year. Whoever does the economics, they ought to just not take the spot price for metal today. They ought to look back a year and try to get a monthly spot price. We have people I know in the community who do that for a living, and they can give you a monthly spot price for the last year every month. That way we can see what the fluctuation is. Yes, abandoned vehicles are a problem. There's no question about it. The question is whether or not we could rig this so that it pays for itself. And that way it pays for itself and you don't have to worry about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other questions or comments from the public? Okay, bringing it back to the board. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? No. I think staff has, I think there's a recommendation. I think staff has direction. I don't think we need to take any action on it, but.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll bring it back to you at a future meeting.
Okay, moving on to item 29, Health and Human Services Agency, Mr. Writings Ward, receive update on the current homeless service.
Mr. Chair, we already did that.
Thank you, Supervisor Dela Cruz.
Mr. Chair, we just did that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
We got something done this morning.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll move to the final item of the day, number 30, out of the Resource Management Agency, Mr. Barnes. It's an update on staff proposed general plan amendment to amend the land use element of the general plan to create the Southside New Community Study Area.
Mr. Chair,
President Munzer.
I need to recluse myself on this item because my wife owns property within 300 feet of the study area, so I am going to recluse myself.
Okay.
come on. Mr. Chairman, good afternoon, members of the board. I'll try and make this brief. The board asked for an update on a staff project. I'm going to start with a story, a personal story, and please indulge me for just a moment. I think you'll understand the connection with this project. As you know, I recently moved to town, bought a house, sort of a fixer-upper. In the house, there was a dishwasher that the door was actually held on with duct tape. I knew that this dishwasher didn't work, so I went and bought a new dishwasher and replaced it. A couple of wires, a hose clamp for the incoming water, a hose clamp for the drain water. Shut the door, put the soap in, put the dishes in, run the dishwasher. Easy as pie. I've done this, I don't know, half a dozen times at least in other houses. Run the dishwasher and the water starts spurting out through the air gap in the sink. And I'm going, holy moly, what's wrong with this? Looking for kinks in the pipes. I crawled under the sink and looked for more kinks in the pipes, and I couldn't find anything wrong. Brand new dishwasher, I'm thinking something's wrong with it. I looked under the sink at the garbage disposal, 5 years old. Had been there a long time. The other dishwasher had apparently been there a long, long time too. It had actually burned up inside. And when I looked at the garbage disposal and the connection to the dishwasher that drains through the garbage disposal to the main drain, I put my finger in the little hole in the garbage disposal and found that the knockout had never been knocked out. There was no drain for the dishwasher. Easy
See,
fix.
it would have helped if you would have got a permit from county planning before you started.
I'll be going now. I don't think my inspector would have done the little finger in the... And I think you'll understand the relevance of that story, and I poke fun at myself for that. But what we're here today to talk about is a staff-initiated procedural amendment. As you know, we've been going through a number of changes in the Resource Management Agency, trying to fold together the Public Works, the Planning, and the Integrated Waste Management departments into one cohesive unit, and at the same time implement the brand new general plan. A lot of changes, a lot of annoying things for a lot of people, and I guess that's part of the growing pains of this. Eventually it will get better, I promise. But one of the things that we discovered is, one of the things that I discovered is that there is a significant lack of written, up-to-date procedures in the Planning Office and the Public Works Office that allow for a level playing field for developments to be processed. To date, and I'm sure you're aware of this, we've been processing developments one at a time as they come in, just entirely on their merits. It's sort of like installing a dishwasher, and we never look beyond the dishwasher itself and maybe hooking that dishwasher up to the wiring and the plumbing. But we've never taken the time to poke our little finger into the drain hole and see if there's something downstream that might be another issue, or if there's a bigger issue related to that kitchen, if the power supply, for example, is adequate. Let me go to another story. Development project a little bit north and east of here that'll remain nameless for right now. Whole bunch of homes under construction. We did a specific plan and environmental impact report, and something we overlooked in doing that project a few years ago was plumbing. The link between that project's effluent, sewage effluent, and the sewage treatment plant. The pipes are not big enough to handle the effluent from that project. Right now, there's a developer scurrying really fast to try and get building permits, finish out their phase of the project, and leave the other developers hanging to do the incremental size increase on all that plumbing downstream. somebody's going to get left holding the bag because we didn't think about those pipes. Same thing. We didn't poke our finger into the pipe and see if there was enough capacity. So we're trying to level the playing field, and that's one of the things that we're doing here with regard to this general plan implementation project, which will establish another community study area within the county, a fifth one, for what we're calling the South Side Study Area, Community Study Area. It's an equity issue, as I've mentioned. Certainly there are equity issues on both sides of this conversation. There are some development projects. In fact, let me go to the map. There are some development projects in the queue in various stages of processing. And we're trying to standardize the rules for looking at those so that we're not looking just at an individual project, at installing that one dishwasher, but we're looking at the entire system of projects all at once in a comprehensive planning effort. There are on this map 14 red dots representing individual property owners that heretofore we have been processing as individual dishwashers. That doesn't make any sense because we lose opportunities to look for things like a needed school site, needed parklands, needed road upgrades, needed plumbing downstream. That exact same plumbing issue is going to occur here. Exactly the same plumbing issue. So what we're doing is putting in place a requirement for a specific plan. What we're intending to do tomorrow night is have the commission recommend or conduct a public hearing. Our staff recommendation is to have the commission recommend to the board, thank you, Lee, a general plan amendment, an amendment to the land use element of the general plan to put in place a community study area, which would in turn require a specific plan to be developed for this area. What I'm proposing is that that specific plan take not more than 15 months to be developed, that the associated environmental impact report for all of the projects, to the extent that we know detail about the projects, be processed at exactly that same time, so it will not stretch out, and that individual project approvals follow on at the end of that specific plan process. There are a number of development applications, or at least concepts, as I noted. Some of these have spent time and money. I can't give them back the time, although I can give them back money in terms of credit for the technical studies that they've done. For example, if your project has prepared a biology study or a traffic study that is useful as a part of the larger specific plan effort, we will give you credit against that, the cost of that, in your portion of the specific plan. Can't give back time. However, we can, as I mentioned, do project-level environmental review for the projects that are far enough along that we know the full details of the projects, and a program-level review, environmental review, for projects such as the Lima property way at the south end here, where we know very little about the development. For something like this at the south end, we would make assumptions about what might be the carrying capacity of the land, what infrastructure might need to be built there, what water supply issues there are, and so on, and do a higher level environmental review. This dual project program level EIR is exactly the same thing that we're doing with the regional park project to the west here. So it's a known entity. It's something we do. It has been done on a fairly regular basis. If the commission recommends after tomorrow night that this project advance forward, we intend to bring this to you for a public hearing at the June 14th meeting. My commitment is that if the board approves this, On June 15th, the next day, I will release an RFP for both the specific plan and the environmental work, and we will kick off that 15-month schedule. And I will personally manage it. I will personally drive it. We will put into the RFP that time is of the essence, that there will be penalties for non-performance by the consultant if the time is extended because of their lack of performance or whatever. Obviously, there are things that we cannot look a year into the future and see, but we will do everything that we possibly can to drive this very aggressively so that development can proceed. So that sort of concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Brent. At this time, are there any questions or comments from members of the board?
No, I think I'd rather hear from the public at this time.
Yeah, I think it sounds like, so this is a proposal that'll be at the Planning Commission tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Actually, I have one question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. De La Cruz.
Yeah, Brent, you mentioned about a specific project about the city halls are now facing a plumbing issue. That same project or area was under special study area one time too.
Yes, sir. We
And
did a
so now
specific plan and an
Now
EIR.
you're asking us to do this a special study area, so, I mean, I'm trying to see where's the connect, where you make the finger and the whole kind of connection.
We're smarter now.
Okay, that's probably what they said back then too, but.
I'm
okay.
sure that's true. You know, I mean, the answer is we learn with every one. That one in particular is not held out as an example. There were some things overlooked in that process. The next one that came along, we did much better. The third one that came along, we did much, much better. And I anticipate we'll learn from all of those and apply those lessons here.
I just want to make sure that, when history doesn't repeat itself again. Just wanna make
I
sure.
absolutely hear you. I've been doing this a long, long time, and yeah.
Supervisor Patella.
Yes, Brent, you did a really good job with the staff report. It's a very clear picture why we need to do this. And, I was speaking with a supervisor, and he was concerned with, us try and be as fair as we can. We know that there's a couple of projects that have submitted applications, understand that perfectly, and I think everybody on this dais, including I think with your presentation this afternoon, is emphasizing trying to be as fair and expedient as possible with this process. But in my mind, just going along with Supervisor De La Cruz, what he was just saying about past mistakes and trying to avoid them, this is our effort and way of trying to avoid those past mistakes and doing a little bit better. And fairness it's not about just you, the developers, as much as the people that live in this county right now and the impacts that will be felt for years to come after you are gone. And by doing the project in a comprehensive manner to the scope that and study that we need to be at, whether it's parks, roads, public safety, water resources, sewer and water, schools, and affordability in a community. These things are to be felt in this community for years to come, and that's the fairness. And I think this is a very important approach and path to go down. I hope the Planning Commission tomorrow night makes the right decision. I don't see any other alternative, and I hope that the folks that have applications in understand, and that they'll have a better development at the end of this. That it's not to be something that we look back and say, "Gosh, that Board of Supervisors, they must have been nuts when they did that." I don't want to do that. So, I hope you take it in the spirit that's offered.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Mr. Chair, one more comment.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you. And Brent, this commitment that you're asking the board to do 18-month, you're also talking about.
You just gave me 3 months, thank you.
I'm sorry, whatever,
15 months.
whatever. A number of months.
Yeah,
Thank you. For academic purposes, thank you.
yeah.
You're also going to include the rate increases, the impact fees, everything's gonna be moving forward, right?
Well, the impact fees, it's a separate conversation, and that
No,
timeline is...
I think it's relevant because if you're talking of doing a special study area, then we need to be serious with stuff, and I understand Supervisor
Sure.
Patello, and I agree with them. We need to look at the global picture instead of just little small, pieces in a big puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the impact fees also need to be addressed? And I know that Supervisor Patello and I serve on that committee.
Yeah.
So if the board and the planning commission decide to go in that time frame, then we have an obligation, Supervisor Patello, to move forward to make sure that those things will be put in place, because I don't want to come back and revisit this and go, oh, guess what?
Of course.
Not enough is being charged, or we missed something, or the school didn't get involved in the discussion. We want to make sure it's done, one time and it's done right.
Absolutely. Through the chair, thank you, Supervisor. That's something that I failed to mention. One of the things that we're looking at as a part of this is community facilities district, potentially, we would look at the cost of all of the infrastructure and apportion that among the various properties. For example, the intersection of Union Road and South Side, should that be borne by the first developer that comes in? Should it be borne by the developer whose one car causes that to go over level of service D? We don't know the answer to that, but I think I know what the equitable thing would be, and that would be to share the cost of that intersection proportionally among the various developers and the other infrastructure as well. Supervisor Patello and you both mentioned schools, and that's a very important topic, in this conversation. The Hollister School District has told us that they are almost out of capacity at Ladd Lane, and they are looking at 4 school sites around their district. This area, from their planning perspective, needs to be one of those. It needs a K-8 school. K-8 school requires 12 to 18 acres, And if we look at each of the individual developments and process them through, we will not ever get a school site. The school district will be forced to go out and buy 35, 40 single-family lots that are already subdivided at the market rate in order to build their school, or kids will be bused across town. Southside School has also expressed a lot of interest in school facility expansion. We have not yet had a conversation with them, but I understand that they're very, very concerned about the developments in the more southerly part of this area. So those are important issues that we cannot address at the individual project level. It's just not possible.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. At this time, I'll open up to the public for comment. Mr. Clerk.
Fuller.
Mr. Chair and Board Member Scott Fuller, I'm here on behalf of the Lico family. I know you're not taking action today, but this is obviously a critical issue for landowners, and I would ask that the indulgence of I might go a little bit over 3 minutes, if that's okay. I don't have a dishwasher story though, but I might go over 3 minutes if that's okay. So I'm gonna read most of this to accomplish that. We think that the proposed new community study area for the South Side Road area in many ways is not consistent with the other new community study areas in the general plan. The general plan's new community study areas were on land that was primarily general planned and zoned agricultural or rural residential. They were supported and even promoted as new community study areas by the landowners of the properties. They were designated in order to allow for the conversion of ag and rural residential land to master planned residential communities. Southside Road area, in contrast, and focusing particularly on the LECO property, is already general plan for residential. The LECO property, in fact, is general plan for up to 20 units to the acre right now. LECOs don't need a general plan amendment because what they are proposing is consistent with the general plan you approved a scant 8 months ago. This general plan, if you remember, is called General Plan 2035, and we're 8 months into it. And now you would be imposing a general plan amendment and specific plan on landowners, particularly the LECOs, who worked with the county for the last several years on their proposal in order to be consistent with your new general plan. I think that's extraordinary. The LECOs worked with the county for the past several years on their current project. They waited for completion of the general plan as they were advised to do so. They developed an application that is consistent with the new general plan. They indicated their willingness to meet the county goals in the general plan for affordable housing, parks, trails, etc. And now again, a GP amendment is being forced on them, one that requires a specific plan because your GP states new community study areas are required to do a specific plan. So you're forcing a cost has not been discussed yet. I assume the county is not proposing to pay for this specific plan. So the landowners are going to pay for it. And typically a specific plan is done by willing landowners. Landowners who want to do it because it accomplishes their purpose. I'm fairly near the end. So the LECO property has development on 2 and soon to be 3 sides. They're annexed into the Sunny Slope Water and Sewer District. They have a written commitment for service from that district. So the plumbing issue that's been discussed, I think, is solved for their property. They're close to existing commercial development, Hazel Hawkins Hospital and Fire Services. They're in the path of development. They have a long history of being cooperative members of the community who will work with the county to coordinate their development proposal with the county's needs in this area. Listening to the discussion so far today, it seems like there's no way to plan a community without doing a new community study area or specific plan. I don't agree with that. I suggest the LECO property and similarly situated properties in the northern portion of this proposed area, which have already applied after working with the county for a significant time period, be allowed to proceed in accordance with your new general plan. And that these properties to the south that are much further away and are probably have willing landowners who would support a specific plan or other long-term planning effort can do that. Certainly your RMA staff, using the new general plan together with standard environmental review and planning practices, have everything they need to process the LECO application and others in this northern part of the area that have already applied in a way that meets your general plan goals and accounts and mitigates for the impacts in the area. I think that the issues are known. They're being discussed. So therefore, in processing the application, in doing the environmental review, in imposing impacts and mitigation measures, you can address these concerns without, 15 months I think is a laudable goal. I think it's optimistic, and having been through specific plans which were we wanted to do, it is hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to do a specific plan and all the environmental work. So I appreciate that the staff and the board, you don't have bad intentions. I'm not saying that. You are trying to do a planning job. I understand that. But the way it's being suggested, I don't think is correct for all the properties. And I don't think it's enough to say, too bad, or we're sorry, or it's overall for the good of the community. I understand that. But this is not a natural disaster here we're facing. The state does not impose something on us. You are completely in control of this. It's your decision. And I think you have other means to accomplish these goals without going to extreme measures, which I consider this to be for certain properties that are involved. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. I'm Todd Deutscher, and I represent Hollister Land Partners, which is the Fay property on South Side Road. I know that many of you have heard from me individually and through email and whatnot, but I would like to take this opportunity, with all due respect to my esteemed plumbing colleague, that the proposed study, I am opposed to it. And the reasons that I'm opposed to it are some of the things that Mr. Fuller just elaborated on. One, that we just completed a specific plan that was approved by this board. The concept, excuse me, a general plan. The concept of the specific plan was voted down unanimously on October 21st by the Planning Commission, and staff was directed not to pursue a specific plan. Yet we are here today dealing with a specific plan, and I do not understand that inconsistency in direction. I would also point out that the assumptions that are in the proposed specific plan staff report some of them are materially incorrect, and such that they would affect the decision-making of the board or the Planning Commission. If, for example, you were to consider the pipeline of homes, of 3,000 homes listed in that particular report, if you take a look at this map and you look at the Lima property, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but I looked at it as a long-term project last year. As far as development goes, from a practical standpoint, it's not developable between natural, biological, topographical, infrastructure. Tres Pinos is not going to take their sewer. There is no water supply. It's not. I don't think it's fair to take this development and skew it based on 1/3 guesstimated growth that's coming from a property that is financially developably infeasible. And that's one consideration. Another misstatement, and Scott touched on it briefly, is there is no way in California to do an EIR in 12 months or 15 months. You can have the best contract in the world and you can have all the penalties in the world, but if you have public hearings and people have feedback, it can be an iterative process, and I would direct your attention to the Brigantinos EIR and how long it took for that. It was months and months and then more months and months after feedback and staff feedback and so on. It's important that the board go into this decision-making with open eyes, understanding fully the reality of what's being presented, because the impacts that are being described here, they're more than optimistic. They're kind of like pie in the sky. As Mr. Fuller said, I would say give consideration to those who have already acted on in good faith on the word of the people of San Benito County, both at the staff level and at the Planning Commission level. We've done our part to go with the old general plan, which we were zoned residential under, go with the new general plan, which we were zoned residential under, do all the studies to the tune of $500,000 in third-party studies to make sure that we were consistent, complying, and had answers to all the questions that staff could want. And Supervisor, may I for just briefly? So, consideration of traffic, obviously a large consideration. So this right here, Southside Road, we did a traffic study on that, and that traffic study wasn't exclusive to our property. It analyzed the impacts of our property, but it took the cumulative effect of all the projects that the county was aware of at the time. And I will point out that those projects in that pipeline list, of all those future projects, were the same list that was used on the Brigantino property, whose EIR has been certified. So I'm trying to understand there, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it was good enough for the county to vote on next week or whenever the Brigantino property gets voted on, those traffic studies were mirrored. The exhibits were mirrored. In fact, our footer on our said Brigantino pipeline. So I would just ask that we please approach this with either both open eyes and fairness to those of us who have expended significant resources and energy, all in good faith, because in our mind, when the open for business sign was on at San Benito County when we came here 2 years ago to start doing this. And what's particularly discouraging is that in almost 2 years of conversation with staff, and only having received one thing by mail over that period of time from staff, the only other thing I received Friday was a notice of incomplete application as a lining your ducks up, so to speak, for the Planning Commission meeting tomorrow night. And I received that on Friday, and that's why you all have that letter in front of you. Basically, explaining why that's not, the letter's invalid that I received. Thank you for your time.
Actually, Mr. Richmond is first. Mr. Richmond is first, but I'll take your card. I'll take your card.
Doesn't matter what order.
Good.
Marty Richard from Hollister. My concern is a little different. Notwithstanding this morning's discussion about the fact that probably having Supervisor Botello and Mayor Velazquez on the same committee at the same time is probably not the best idea in the whole world.
We get along better than what it sounds.
Notwithstanding that, you're the one who brought it up, not me. Notwithstanding that, for those properties looking 40 years down the road, if we think those properties and the northern part of this are going to be annexed eventually, if that's our intention eventually, then whatever study you do, you got to get the city involved, because it would be silly to approve it on a county basis and kind of design it on a county basis and kind of ignore where it's going to end up in the end. Now, if truly, and you know, I've had people at the Planning Commission shake their head, but I don't think shaking your head is a vote. It's just a reaction of going, oh no. If truly, you really, truly don't think this is going to wind up in the city environment, then you can disregard my, little speech here completely. But if you look forward and you say, oh no, right now it's just kind of abutting the city and kind of abutting the zone of influence, oh yeah, where is that going to wind up in the end? If that's going to wind up in the city in the end, I think you're going to have to, if you do the study, however you decide, you're going to have the city work along with you to study it, because they're going to wind up eating the pie in the end. You may bake it, but they're going to wind up eating it, and it would be unfair for you to do that. I am very concerned, and no one's ever called me anti-development, I can assure you that. I hear the opposite all the time. But I am very concerned that all the stuff that you do have lined up, we have forecasted the impacts, but we haven't really seen the impacts. And sometimes the forecast does not come true. Sometimes it's better, most of the time it's worse. That's just a fact of life. I can see what's going on already at Santana Ranch. They haven't built that many homes there, and they haven't sold that many homes, and that many aren't occupied out of the 1,000, whatever they're doing. And boy, you can see the impacts on Fairview and all that. So we've got enormous amount of development happening around the Four Corners area, or whatever you're going to call it there, when you look at all of them together. And down at the other end of the pipe, we've got the Del Webb development, which I supported also. So I have no regrets about that, but we have both ends of the pipe, and we don't, and we're talking about how many years it's going to take to get that pipe, that Union Road pipe, fixed. So anything that goes in there is going to use Union Road as primary. And I'll wrap up by saying, if you do the study, I think you ought to get the city involved, especially in the northern part. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Anthony Lico.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm here to speak on behalf of my family, the Lico family, I should say. I have some concerns with the status of our Pacific Union project. I would like to remind the board the development of the site was not conceived recently, but has been in the works with the county for over 18 years. My father obtained a 14 one-acre lot tentative map in 1998. In addition, we have worked in conjunction with Sunny Slope Water and provided well sites, for with your dishwasher and your all that good stuff, you know what I mean, the toilets. Therefore, we feel we should be, we have worked in conjunction with Sunny Slope Water and provided a well site in exchange for water, sewer needs for our project. Therefore, we feel we should be exempt from the recent created Southside Area County Proposed General Plan Amendment requirement. At this time, we request the county release our site from the study and allow us to move forward with the project. Thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wishing to provide comments? Yeah, I'll bring it back. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the board? I know that we're not making a decision. Certainly, we have a lot to think about and consider, but we'll certainly wait until our June, our 14th meeting, I believe. And so we're going to have that in the, and it'll just be part of the regular meeting. Okay. Do we want to maybe consider doing an evening meeting for that?
With the planning commission?
No, just
No,
us.
just
Just
us.
that item.
Yeah, that would be probably a very good idea.
So let's do that, Ray. Let's plan on the 14th. We'll have our regular agenda, and then rather than adjourn at the end of the day, we'll just we'll continue our meeting into the evening, and then we could reconvene about 6 or something, just to hear this item, to encourage the participation from not only our developers, but I think it's important to allow local residents that will be significantly impacted by future development, allow them to come here if they want to voice their opinion as well.
And I have some comments,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios.
If I could. I want to say, first of all, that I really appreciate, Brent, the thought, the planning that is going behind this. I appreciate that because I know what you're trying to achieve. I appreciate the idea of having a cohesive plan. All that is good. I think for the future of San Benito County, it could serve us really well. It's just that, to me, at this point, 8 months ago, we gave a huge nod to our general plan as it was, and now here we are trying to amend it, and something we probably should have done back 8 months ago before we approved it. But, it may be too little too late, but it doesn't matter. I just feel that it's something that we should have given more thought to or better thought back then. I guess, so my question would be, can we accomplish the same results without going through this extreme path? And I say extreme because it is affecting a lot of people that have been involved even before we approved the general plan. When we had our open meetings, people would come in, they would give us information about their future developments in that area. We would talk about it. We pretty much gave a nod by approving our general plan 8 months ago as it was. And now to put that level of demand, so to speak, seems a little unfair, even though I think that the planning is a wise thing to do. But I guess, like I said, going back, can we hold developers, my question is, can we hold developers to those standards that we want to meet for the future by, we have it already in our ordinances that they have to meet certain criteria. They have to jump through hoops. They have to do the traffic. They have to do the biological studies. They have to plan parks with us. They have to do all that. Is there any way we can do this without having to go through the extreme of amending the general plan and make it a specific study area? I, like Scott, am concerned about what is this going to cost the county at the end of the day. Yeah, maybe we could put it on the backs of the developers, and at the end of the day, they probably should be paying for all of that. But how are we going to do it? It just seems like there's not enough of a concrete plan to move forward. And so my third question is, can we do this if we wanted to move forward with a specific plan, with a new community study area and a specific plan? Could we exclude people that have already applied, whether complete or incomplete, on their applications? And that would be fair. They've applied. They applied because they were given the nod when we were going through the general plan planning. So just ideas that I need to throw out there, because I just feel that this is an extreme approach to, and somewhat unfair, and there's got to be another way. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor, do you want us to try and address those questions now, or shall we take, I mean, there's very good questions and very complex answers.
No, I don't expect you to answer them now, but I really want to give food for thought as we move forward. And, the Planning Commission is going to be hearing this. They could Well, the final decision is going to be ours.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they could make a recommendation to do the new community study area.
Or they could recommend that it not proceed at all.
Yeah, and they might not. But I really want to give more opportunity for us to have that meeting, to really give you an opportunity to think of other ways so we can do this without having to amend the general plan. Make it fair. Think about where we draw the line. Applicants, complete or incomplete, or excluded from this. I don't know how many applicants there are now. Do you have any idea?
Well, there were 14 projects, actually 15, because one person who saw the map doesn't have a dot on the map said, oh, I want to be in.
But they're not in yet. They
They're not
haven't
in.
applied.
There's no application. It's just the glimmer in the eye.
Okay. How many applicants do we have?
It depends on how you count. If you're counting what I would call complete applications, just one, Mr. Brigantino.
No, I'm not talking complete applications. I'm talking applications
Applications
complete
that
or
we have
incomplete.
discussed with property owners in some respect. I mean, this is sort of the.
And Brent, an application would require a developer to come in with a map of some sort, and would maybe pay some fees, perhaps maybe have done some studies, whether it be traffic, geological, whatever.
Studies are not required.
Right, but
It's-
they have done some of that. So
in some cases they have. I'm seeing eight properties on here that have done some design work of some kind, some technical studies.
okay, now does that mean that they have applied with the county? When they've done design work, does
Well,
that mean that
that's a
they've
different question. An actual application for a subdivision map or a use permit, I can't say. I don't think it includes all those 8.
Okay, but there could be as many as 8 that have made an application and have had conversation with
So,
staff.
yes,
and have
absolutely,
had-
absolutely, that I personally know of.
So
the-
my point is this, is that we cannot, it just seems backwards for me to now go back and change the general plan that we just adopted 8 months ago. But moving forward, perhaps we can do something to address those concerns and still end up meeting the needs that we are going to have. We can hold, I'm saying that we're in charge. We can hold developers accountable for those
So the-
needs that we have
Sure.
in some form.
Through the chair, Supervisor, the issue when we talk about those 8 developers is an equity issue, and where we draw the line, whether it's they've spent 2 years, 25 months, $10,000, $12,000, where does it fall? Whether they have a vested interest in an application, a concept of some kind. Because if I say just to pick on Mr. Lico, for example, because he was the last one to speak, if he's invested enough to make that cut, then another developer just across the street's going to come and say, in fact, already has, well, they're going to get off, why not me? And so I don't know where to draw that line, and it becomes an arbitrary conversation. And I think that I'm not going to give advice on behalf of council, but I think that's a dangerous game to play for the board. So I'm trying to create an equitable process. Second point I'd like to make is, and this is a very serious point, I want you to consider this now collectively. I mean, you don't have to address it now, but consider it now. If we're going to get a school site, a 15-acre school site, how will we do that if we're doing individual properties? Very few of these properties, with the exception of the Lima property in the far southeast, have 15 acres that they can give up without completely
Giving up their
changing the
project.
development scheme there. Unless we're going to do a comprehensive planning effort of some kind, get all of the parties in one room and, and I don't want to be facetious, but lock the door and sort of make the deal happen to get those major kinds of community facilities. I don't know another way to put folks on the hook to have that conversation. We could do individual development agreements with property owners, but offering from Mr. Lico, an acre of school site, just to pick a number, that doesn't get me anything.
Yeah, no,
Right.
and that's the part that I do appreciate why you're doing this for those issues, especially.
One more thing I'd like to point out. We're not intending to change the general plan here. We're only intending to change the procedure by which we implement the general plan in this area. The land use designations would not change. As far as we can tell, there might be opportunities to do, in the interest of trip reduction and jobs and stuff, there might be some opportunities to do commercial development. We don't know the answer to that. But if a small neighborhood center were to go here somewhere with walking, access to it and that kind of thing, it would get car trips off the road, and that would be a good thing for the community. Again, we don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think we don't, and that's precisely why I think we cannot move forward this way, because we don't know the answer to it, and we don't have criteria that would really identify what it is and who it is that we're going to, consider. And until we do that, then I don't feel that this is appropriate.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
With respect, that's what this is about, is to do that planning work.
Well, but you just mentioned, let's say that we want a developer to do some commercial. They've already gone in one direction to do 90 homes, and they've got only so many acres. Now, in the new study area, we're going to expect that they do, and so now it would change their whole project and put more cost to their, and this is not because I'm a pro-developer person. I just feel that we have made a decision as a board. We have gone in a direction. We have adopted our general plan. We knew exactly what was going to go there. And now, 8 months later, we're making a U-turn. And it just seems unfair. And so unless we can come up with criteria that maybe we are going into a slippery slope, area, I just don't know how we can move forward with this.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Barrios. I look at it the completely opposite way, is that I don't think it's fair to go forward as individual projects and not taking into account all these questions. It has to be done comprehensively. I served on the Planning Commission, and so I think I have a different level of evaluating projects and the impacts. Mr. Dusher, yeah, I hope I'm not slaughtering your name. He made some points in his presentation and in his letter here that he really felt like he was doing the right thing with his application process. Just because you turn in an application doesn't mean it gets approved.
No, I understand.
That doesn't imply approval when you give the county a check. That's just you're buying county time to work through the application process. You could still be turned down. And what we had during the time that some of these projects were going through, and I looked at it, and no comments from the staff as you were turning in different studies. And I think back, what was blowing up in our face with our staff at that period of time was we had no planning staff. We had Byron and a couple part-time people that had zero experience, and we were pushing them with other projects that were the general plan, and I don't know if we did it justice. I don't have that confidence. I don't have confidence that the traffic study that was mentioned during the public comment, that we should have a whole lot of confidence in that. I'm really, really concerned about, the circulation in the southern part of Hollister. And, Mr. Richmond made a comment about whether or not the mayor and I get along. We get along just fine. And that was one of the things that he's been harping about is, we should be working closer together and making sure that, the city's impacts are addressed in this. And we haven't, not one bit. At the fire meeting, I mentioned these projects going in. And one of the reasons I mentioned about the staffing levels this morning, this is a serious problem for them because we're adding 1,000 homes. That should be another engine company. So how are we addressing this fiscally neutral to provide those services along with our partners, the city of Hollister, to provide these things? And if we just let these 3 applications go or 2 applications go, I think we're toast as far as trying to achieve a level of service going into the future that people expect. And the traffic thing is be a mess anyway. Let's just, cut the chase. Union Road is be a mess. South Airline going into Hollister, it's be a mess. If we have 600 to 1,000 units, single-family homes being built, and that's what's being. If we don't do this, that's all we have is single-family homes that is unaffordable for our county, rather than see what we could do to design a growth plan that would be a better fit. And if we want to go back, if you recall, and we've all been here before, you haven't been, Scott was, the Licos were, to a time that we have growth restrictions via the vote of the people. Let's keep going down this path, and we'll have another Measure G.
Thank you, Supervisor. And if I could add some comments, this is a community, a county, a city that has been, riddled with planning issues and planning problems, not for years, but you could say for decades. It's not by accident that we had a sewage spill in the city of Hollister, and that city was imposed with had a moratorium for 10 years. As an elected official, as a supervisor, I'm doing what I can to ensure that we have proper planning throughout, rural San Benito County. And I'm not a rubber stamp. If you guys brought checks, you don't have my vote. You have to earn my vote, and this is part of the process of earning my vote. This is a 2-step process, and I appreciate staff. I appreciate what you guys have done. And at the same time, we're doing what we can to make sure that we have proper planning and that we have this comprehensive approach to ensure that we can accommodate and create, have a certain quality of life for new residents that will be here. But not only that, what's most important to me as well is to ensure that our existing residents aren't riddled, that we don't impact their quality of life. And so this is going to take a very comprehensive approach. And certainly, sure, we can point to equity and the general plan process, but I can honestly say we did not anticipate this kind of growth in this area when we're going through the general plan. Had we would have created a study area much sooner than we are, than we are now. And so I know, for me personally, I see this as, as a 2-step, as a 2-step process. This is going to go through the channels of government. It's going to go to the Planning Commission. It'll come back to our board, whether it's this specific proposal, whether we can find some consensus to follow another track, I don't know. But maybe we can reach some common ground. And if all else fails, then we go to each one of these developers, and then we have to vote these projects up or down. And like I said, just because, I think it was well said, just because you submit an application and get a stamp and turn in a check, that doesn't imply that your project is approved. And certainly as one supervisor speaking from here and having been here for 6 years, you certainly have to earn my vote. You don't automatically get it. So Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak up. I just want to clear, and I said it already in the past, I want to hear it today, Brett. When the Planning Commission does meet, I want an answer for these two applicants that are here today. I want to hear that answer that, no, you're just going to have to wait in line, because they're going to be coming to us every single time, every board meeting. So let's just tell them straight up, and tomorrow's a good start, the Planning Commission. You know, it's up or down vote, and the board of supervisors, we know then. We'll know what the flavor will be.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I'll keep asking the questions. How do we treat this application? It's always done. How do we treat the RICOs? How do we do with that one?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear an answer. Hopefully you get it tomorrow from the Planning Commission. Now, my other one, Mr. Chair, and this is more for you, is that I'm not going to be here on the 14th, on June 14th, right? Is that what it is, our meeting?
Yes.
I'm going to be gone from the 14th to the 20th. I'm not going to attend.
Well, that could be a problem, especially if we have one member that's recused.
Yes.
Right. You
Special
could,
meeting?
you know, I'm available the 13th. I'll be available the 21st in the afternoon.
Okay, so since we're planning to do the evening session, maybe we could have a special meeting when Supervisor De La Cruz returns.
I'll be
you
I'll be
wanna
back
work-
the 21st.
Okay, why don't you work with CAO and get a date?
Okay,
And then
perfect.
we'll
Mr.
bring
Chairman,
it back to.
did you say, I'm sorry, Supervisor, did you say you were here on the 13th?
Yes, I'll be here Monday.
Okay, just for my money, I would rather move it up than back in the spirit of expediting.
Rest of the board, are they okay with the 13th, Monday
I have,
13th?
I have to be in San Francisco by 12 o'clock midnight, Monday night.
Oh, that makes it tough.
Just want to share that with you.
Well, the three of us could make a decision.
Why don't we move all these developments down there to the east side, on this side? Okay.
We'll work
I
on the
think if
schedule.
we go to 6, you know, I don't anticipate this thing going on for 2 or 3 hours.
Does it require?
It could. It could.
Start at
What if we
5,
start at
maybe?
5? Start at 5?
We could start earlier.
And then if we have to continue it, we can continue it
Okay,
if you have
fair
to
enough.
take off.
So
Okay, let's do
Monday
5,
the
the 13th.
Okay.
5 o'clock.
And I do have one more comment, Mr. Chair, before we close. It's that, and this is with all due respect, I was here prior to your being here when the general plan was getting, we were going through it, having all our meetings. And I remember the developers, we knew how we knew what it was zoned. We knew that there was going to be development there. And we had these property owners come to our meeting and tell us, include us. We want to be included in because this is what we would like to do in the future. So with all due respect, we did know that this was going to be an area of a lot of growth because they came to the meetings. And Supervisor Patello, you and I were there, and Supervisor De La Cruz, they were showing interest. They were coming. And so I can't turn away now and pretend that I didn't hear them and I didn't, give them the go-ahead. So, anyway, it wasn't a done deal because they still had to apply. You're absolutely right. They have to jump through the hoops, but they did know that we were planning growth in that area.
Point taken.
And thank you for your comments. Okay, so with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Yes, right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 4-0.
What are we calling our meeting? Just special